What is the greatest comeback you have said to someone that left them speechless? So one Thanksgiving we were eating dinner at my BF's parents' house. BF's deadbeat cousin was there and kept going on and on about how the family dog recognized him the moment she smelled him. She's blind. My BF's sweet old grandpa was sitting beside me and leaned over to whisper, "It's hard to forget what sheet smells like." I played high school football one year. And after a scrimmage one of my teammates looked at me and said, "Hey, anybody ever told you you suck at football?" And without thinking I replied, "Nobody that matters." He was a bully. But to be fair, I really did suck at football. When I worked at Starbucks, there was someone who spilled a bunch of coffee and was trying to clean it herself. My coworker walks up to clean it for real. "Coffee spiller, it's okay. I got it. I'm a waitress. I do this all the time." Coworker, "You spill coffee all the time?" He was trying to make a joke. But she just looked at him with a blank expression and walked away. Do you realize you always answer a question with a question? Without even thinking. Does that bother you? Hanging out with friends. Throwing crap at each other. My wife, "No, not my face, it's my moneymaker." Me, "No wonder we're always broke." She found it as hilarious as I did. My sister got me good once when I was about 19. My job then was newspaper delivery. I went into a room and saw my dog sound asleep on the couch and I went, "Tough life. Huh. All you do is eat, sleep and cheat." My sister responds from the other room, "That's all you do to accept you have a paper route." I couldn't even think of a response. Was in the army. A master corporal of mine overheard a sick story I was telling. He said, "Your sister doesn't count." I said, "No. But yours does." He laughed. "I did drill for an extra hour." Well, no sheet. What have we got here? A ducking comedian? Private joker? I admire your honesty. Hell, I like you. You can come over to my house and duck my sister. I used to work with this guy who would always bring up the fact that his dad walked out on his family. There could be two people having a conversation on the other side of the room. And he'd hear one of them say the word dad and he'd interject with something like, "Must be nice to have a dad." I wouldn't know. My dad left us when I was 6 and we haven't seen him since. This guy was also just a generally unlikable person and kind of antagonistic towards everyone and everything. So he didn't generate much sympathy with these antics. One day I told him to do something and we had this exchange. "You're not my dad. If I were your dad, I would have walked out on you too." When I was working in retail, my manager, who was a bigger fellow, and I used to talk shit to each other for fun. One day he was congratulating himself for being such a good shit talker and he said something like, "I'm the king of throwing shade. I throw mad shade." To which I replied, "You do cast a white shadow." Back when I was a smoker, I went to a gas station late at night to buy a pack. It was late, so instead of going inside you had to order at this little walk-up window. When the attendant slid my cigs under the slot and I grabbed them, the kid behind me goes, "Don't you know smoking can heal you?" And I said, "Yeah. So can talking to strangers." Working retail and an hour-long barrage of anger from a customer led to me filling out a return form while he leant over me aggressively telling me how he would end me, end my career, end the business. Before I snapped, stood up, pointed at his address on the invoice and said, "The difference between you and me is I know where you live." He grabbed his form and bolted. Still know that ducker's address near 8 years later. Edit, you guys really like glitter and poop. Edit 2. Here's the full story I wrote out on Funny Junk back when green text style writing was destroying the internet. Funnyjunk.com. Not me. But I was there for it. Doing early document research way down in the basement of a big law firm. Working on a med mal defense. This case involved where a guy went into an urgent care complaining about frequent urination. Doctor ran a few tests, prescribed him some medication for BPH and let him go. Eventually goes to another DR, I think it was like a year later. He has prostate cancer and it's spread. By this stage it's inoperable. 95% of the time these cases are just grieving families channeling their anger inappropriately. Anyway. Going through docs with me and 2 colleagues. Let's call them Brad and Amy. Amy looks at some report and is like, yeah. Our doctor is in the wrong here. This blood test has a normal range of XY. His is Z. This should have led to follow up. He probably would have lived if they caught it then. Brad looks at her and says in just about the most condescending voice possible, and where did you go to medical school? Amy answers Yale. Turns out, Amy had done her med school and left during her 2nd year of rotations. Deciding that being a DR wasn't for her, she decided to enroll in law school. I was at the gym about 6 months ago and this guy I went to high school with approached me. He graduated a year ahead of me and opened with snatch and squats. I stare back at him uncomfortably. Full stop. I recognize him but don't remember his name. I thought that was you. You used to be so weird. Everyone thought you were so weird. Yeah. Probably he starts telling a story about casually bullying me. The good old days. Sweet memories. Act. And then finishes it with, but you look so great now. I have always thought you were beautiful. What do you think about me? I don't think about you. He stared at me. And I continued to stare at him until he finally walked away. I was waiting in line at a bar for drinks when this massive jock dude tried to cut in front of me. I am 5 feet 7 inches. 145 pounds. And he was at least a half foot taller and outweighed me by 80 pounds. When I call him out he went off on me, calling me a little itch and a pussy. In my drunken confident state I said to him, I'm standing up to a guy twice my size and you're picking a dude half your side. Who's the real pussy in this situation? He just stood there and stared daggers into me. He eventually said that when I leave I better watch my back. Edit. Spelling. Was over at a friend's house in JI and his dad was making jokes about me having a small big dick for some reason, but I just paid it no mind even though it bugged me. Couple hours pass and he comes in the room again and says something like, Dixie 745 you find your peen yet? Before I could stop myself I blurted out, yeah, it was in your wife's mouth. Needless to say I was asked to leave that day. How her honesty though, WTF, what he expecting? Woman at work asked me if her forehead was too shiny. I told her on the plus side. If you ever get lost in the mountains you can use it to signal aircraft. She slapped me. But not in a serious way. Annoying coworker asked me, what do you even do all day? I wasn't having it. Not today. So I said, not wasting other people's time. The office went quiet. The president called me and congratulated me on the sweet burn. The hottest blonde fell into my lap and we made out. The boss let me go home early and gave me a raise. Everyone cheered as I walked out. And then I woke up. Duck. In a tantrum. My 6-year-old son told me I was a bad daddy. I immediately deadpanned he was adopted. The stunned look on my boy's face is seared in my brain. Not my proudest parenting moment. I bulleted my way through an HTML course in college. Our final project was making a website for a company. Mine was a coffee company and it was perfectly functional but trash. It was ugly. All the colors clashed. It kinda did actually hurt your eyes if you looked at it for too long. The text was colored all ducked up and nearly blended with a background, so you had to really try to read it. It was really bad. But functionally perfect. Which was the point. So as we were presenting, my instructor pointed out every visual flaw. She just dreamed it. She said it was the ugliest site she had ever graded, and I was lucky I wasn't graded on how visually displeasing it was. I made an effort to sound professional as I explained, my site caters to the younger crowd. You are not my target demographic. Thank you for your input though. It was probably as legend as I'll ever be. She was probably like 35-40 years old or something. Got a 100% though. I have great renewable success with I can live with that, it fit most things and is usually unexpected. I was at Target once with my then roommate and I was buying some NAR for some personal grooming. When checking out, my roommate made sure to say right in front of the female cashier, "Dude, why are you buying Naya?" I responded, "So you don't get hair in your mouth." That shut him up. Elementary school was great for these. Heard a girl say I'm worth more than you. To some kid and he snapped back, "Yes. With the same price per pound you are." Like. A lot. Left all of us rolling. I got my golden moment. 2. At my school there was this short dude called Lars who was always picking fights. He said to me once, "Can I call you King Skugsturiii?" imitating my dialect, and I instantly replied, "Can I call you Extra Lars since you're so ducking tiny?" Even his posse laughed and he never bothered me again. Worked at a pizza place and I had recently dyed my hair blue. Rich snobby guys comes in with his wife. Gives me a look and says, "What happened? Did you lose a bet without skipping a beat?" I looked at his wife. Looked back at him and said, "No. Did you?" Somebody at work said something like, "I'll give you 6 inches," and I immediately responded, "I don't need to see your big dick 6 times. I worked in a technical writing capacity for a small, family-run company. The office manager was the owner's stepson and was a massive prima donna. He loved to belittle the office staff and make life harder for everyone with his condescending attitude and general incompetence. He once questioned the phrasing of a passage in a report that I wrote. I stuck to my guns and this raised his ire. He began to yell and sputter, "Don't you dare question me. I have an English degree." "Do you have an English degree? Do you?" As I watched his face turn progressive shades of purple, I replied, "Sorry, Jim." After high school, they determined that I had sufficient command of the language and that no further study was necessary. I thought he was going to stroke out. I was waiting tables out of high school and wasn't very outspoken to strangers. I had a table of 4 dudes. Pretty loud. Joking around. etc. I think myself funny, but again, this was before I was more outgoing. They got the salad bar and after they sat down with the plates from it, I asked if they found everything okay. One guy says, "No. Where are the women at?" I said without even thinking. "They saw you coming and ran off." The whole table busted up and I got a great tip. Girl with a tape recorder and microphone outside a strip mall near the New Year. "Hi, I am taking a poll on New Year's resolutions." Me. "Yeah, it's to not talk to strangers," as I walked right past her. I looked back and she was laughing. My friend in middle school was kind of Rick. And she was chubby. I remember her fighting with the guy and she said, "I have more friends than you," and he goes, "Yeah? If you count chicken wings." I tried so hard to hide my tears from laughing. I went to Catholic high school and had to wear a belt every day as part of the uniform. One day I had forgotten the belt. And the vice principal, who was a very fat man, had caught me. He said, "Excuse me, young man. I can't see your belt." I stopped in my tracks and said, "Yeah? I can't see yours either." I was on the receiving end of 5 days detention for that one. Me and my co-worker once. Him, "You're just like my liver, barely functioning and not doing your job." He's an alcoholic. Me, "You're just like my appendix, useless and have no purpose." This was 2 weeks ago and he's still livid. I said that to him. Back in high school, there was this girl. She was incapable of saying anything nice. Everything out of her mouth was an insult. The only nice things she had to say were about dolphins. She was crazy into dolphins. One day, the teacher handed back an exam we did. I was top of the class. When the teacher shared that news, the girl rolled her eyes, looked at me, and said, "You're such a pig." I held up my exam. Well, I guess this proves pigs are smarter than dolphins. First time she'd ever been rendered speechless. When I was 8, I wanted to drink soda in the morning. My dad refused to let me have soda that early. So I said, "You're drinking beer this early?" He didn't say anything, just walked over to the fridge and grabbed me a soda XD. He was watching a game with his brother, which is why he was drinking in the morning. Not an alcoholic lol. When I worked in the oil field, it wasn't unusual for the crew to go out drinking after a long day shift. I happened to drink a little too much, and the following day I was paying for it. One of the guys asks me how you doing, bud? Not looking so good as I'm puking out the bus door getting ready to head back to the barn for a crew change. I quickly responded in between dry heaving spells, I'm feeling about as good as you look. His mouth dropped in shock. Guy was taken back from my usually quiet demeanor. He finished with saying, did I just get f***ing roasted by Mexi pirate ? Edit. Words. Grammar. Spelling. Middle school. Peeing at the urinal. I was at the corner urinal slightly angled toward the wall because why not? I was an awkward middle schooler. Kid walks in. What's the matter? Don't wanna show off your pee-pee? Me. Instantly, you're right. It would be showing off. I was so proud. Very attractive and very gay co-worker of mine came into the room. He pointed to some short, scruffy facial hair and said, "What do you think?" I said, "Dude, if you need a beard, I'm right here." Dead silence. A full 3 seconds later, he, and everyone else who could hear us, cracked up laughing. Once the moment passed, I told him that I just couldn't leave a setup like that hanging. Back to business as usual. My uncle, who is loaded and has a passion for stirring shit, was making some comment about my boyfriend at the time, saying that he wasn't ever going to make much money and that he would never be able to bring me places or buy my nice things. All of this sucked me on all sorts of levels. But eventually he said something along the lines of, "Don't you want a rich man?" I just looked at him as calmly as I could and said, "Nah. Money makes people bitter." A druggie on the corner asking for change called me a hooer when I wouldn't give her any money. I turned around and said, "At least whores do something for the money they get on the corner." My son, his wife and their daughter were making their way back to the parking garage. They had to climb some external stairs, and a homeless woman was blocking about half of one of the staircases. My son politely said, "Excuse me." She looks up and says, "Get you and your hunt daughter off my steps." My son ushers his family past her and as he's turning to go says, "You know, suicide is always an option." While working behind the counter at Mickey D's. Customer, "Hey cutie. How about you slip an extra hash brown in that bag?" Me, "Sure. That'll be $1.07. At a birthday party of a close friend there was this super obnoxious guy. I think he was drunk already when he arrived and he told everyone stories from his super exciting life, regardless if we wanted to hear them or not. His favorite story was centered around him having been homeless on the streets for about 2 years. He didn't tell it in a humbling way, or as a sob story in order to make us pity him tough. He was basically using it to brag about how it made him stronger and he has seen it all. Nothing can get to him anymore. He told this sheet to at least a dozen people at the party, all while drinking more and thus becoming even more obnoxious and confrontational. He started picking fights and so the rest of the guests decided that he had to leave the party immediately. He shouted and argued with us for a while, so we forcefully dragged him out of the door and told him to get lost. He stood outside for a minute or so and then told us we couldn't just throw him out like that, because he had no way to get home before morning and he would have to sleep on the street if we do that. At which point I just stared at him for a second and told him, "Well, that should be something you should be able to handle with all your experience, right?" The look on his face and his utterly stunned silence were priceless. TLDR, guy at party keeps bragging about sleeping on streets. I tell him he shouldn't have a problem with being thrown out then. Someone cracked on my mom once and I said, "Your mom has her clit pierced with a boat anchor." And now I'm the undisputed reigning champ of your mama jokes in my friend circle. I find that the worst thing about my 8-year-old is that there are so many things that come out of his mouth that just beg for the response of "So's your mom." Then I realize, oh shit, I'm your mom.